because we've been talking about this for a little while. I'm Kate Sekules, I'm a PhD candidate here, and my subject of my dissertation to come is mending. This is Coppinger, who's kindly co-presenting with me, and we met when I did an MA at NYU in costume history, and Anne was my teacher, and all my teachers, of conservation. She is the senior conservator at the museum at FIT, which if you don't know it, go immediately because they just opened the exhibition. It's beautiful. So Anne's in charge of the conservation of a museum collection. I'm in charge of doing a kind of mending which is often called visible mending, and which has it honours the life of your clothes, and you feel, and you're all here because you were attracted to that idea. I think that we have life in our closets that means something to us, that our clothes aren't just inanimate objects, they work with you, they live with you, and you want to preserve them. And what we did is we've invited you to submit some clothes. We picked out 2 incredible pieces, and we got an extra from Andrew. These are going to be our stars of the night. Would you come up, Claire? Because we're going to ask you to introduce your piece. And I think we should have you talk about it in your words, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. This is a maternity dress that my mother wore when she had me, and then she sort of stopped dressing altogether and wore like t-shirts from JCPenney and jeans that didn't fit her. But she had these lovely vintage. She loved vintage clothing and had like exactly my waist, and then like moved to California in the 90s after Oberlin and was wearing a lot of linen. Yeah, and then it all just went in the closet. She sort of hoarded and was totally gone from like the moment I came out of the womb to college, at which point I was going through closets and found it, and I cut it to be this length. It was for
Oh, you shortened it.
I shortened it. And at the time I was like doing ballet and I had to sew my point shoes, but I didn't sew much. I sort of knew how to use the singer if someone else started for me. But I did very little sewing at the time, except when, I don't know, I replaced this button when I was maybe 21. But I brought it to college after a really depressing semester off living with my grandfather on 92nd Street. And I was stepping into my gayness. For some reason, this was the only thing I felt comfortable in.
Wow.
I don't know why, it's not even that gay, but I wore a turtleneck under it, and I was like sort of depressed and like getting up early and writing a thesis, and I just only wore this dress. And so it was in very good condition actually when my mom let me have it from the closet, and then it became like this.
Did it make you feel connected to her? Was that part of it, do you think?
No, I hated her at the time.
So you wore it to pieces on purpose?
Yeah, probably. But now I feel connected to her.
Yeah, that's great. So let's move on to what you want to do with this. So
Yeah.
did you send us with the pictures, which are great, thank you? There was a pillow, and you had a strip of this sewn into the pillow.
Yeah, so
I presume that might be from here.
Yes.
mending,
Yeah.
right. Mending is my favorite thing to do now.
Oh.
For the past few years, it's kind of the only thing I do.
Good.
Okay. So someone gave me a pillowcase that had a tear out of it, and I decided to add this back as an accent.
Do you regret that now? Would you like to wear this again?
No, I don't. Well, I was, in the moment that I incorporated it into the pillow, I thought I was just going to copy the pattern and replicate the dress. Because I felt helpless. I don't usually feel helpless with mending, but with
It's
how
extreme.
thin the linen has
Yeah.
become, I didn't.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is the way it falls and how light it is.
Yeah.
And so adding a lot of patches would change the weight
Yeah.
and the way it fell.
Well, I'm going to show you something. I was going to wait to do this because it's sort of later on, but on the other hand, this kind of can be this is the nearest thing I've done to a really, really wrecked linen thing. This is absolutely shredded. I don't know if any of you have got that linen jersey that was suddenly in all the stores when I last bought new clothes about, I don't know, 12 years ago, and it just disintegrates. This is Vince, which is a medium label, and it just fell to absolute pieces. And I really enjoy mending things when they're way beyond repair, which this I think counts in this. And what I like to do, and it's so great to say that it's your favourite thing to do, so I'm going to hope to add some strings to your mending bow to mend all the metaphor, and to have you maybe think about this as a project that is more of an art project than you maybe have expected. Wearable art, really, that's the thing that has some history. So it's become a completely different thing, and I always, when you said you love the way it hangs, that's what I always loved about this. I just love the way it hangs, but then
it doesn't hang the same way.
Well, it doesn't hang the same way, and then you can't wear it because it's nothing but holes, and then, so I'm going to give you the technique, because that's what we said we'd do, right? 2 ways, so it might be more than 2, but you can't repair that, and I'm going to ask Anne in a minute what you would do, and everything you can do with this, but you need to strengthen it, and it's going to need a lot. So what I call it an endoskeleton lining, and that's a problem with something with speed, because you're spoiling that lovely hang, that flow when you line it. So you have to choose your material very carefully. So this is a very soft and flowing. It was a dress actually, and I shouldn't show you, but I will. But the way it's pieced. Because it wasn't all done at the same time, and then it's extemporaneous. It's very much something that grows along with your use and your feelings about. And
you said you shouldn't show us.
Well, because it's really. Okay.
Okay. Turn it inside out.
It's shameful. We call this the dark side in embroidery, and it's not really inappropriate. It's also still hurling. It's not. It's still in progress. As will this be. You won't stop once it started. So it's the really bad.
I love it.
And the front. So it's sort of all sorts of angles, because this is cut sort of on the bias and had a seam going diagonally, because it's fashion.
Is that knit?
It is knit. I'll pass this round. I'll put it back the right way, and you can all have a look. So. At this point, let's get Anne's opinion before we continue.
So from a museum point of view, what we like to do what we call minimal intervention. Okay, we're not looking to impose our own will on the object. We want to keep it in the state that we actually receive it. But the challenge for us would be to exhibit it. Would people get the right thing? Get the right idea? Possibly what I would maybe suggest would get a very sheer, lightweight silk and maybe line the whole thing and just put it over, make like an underlayer, sort of like your striped fabric. But I would do a complete garment and then just overlay this piece and then tack it in various areas.
Exactly.
But I would also make sure that if I was exhibiting on the label copy, I would put the story in as well, because that's really critical.
Well, this is also a very important aspect of conservation and museums as a whole, the stories of things. We're used to the history being part of the museum.
Yeah, to contextualize it.
But not necessarily in costume, because what is often collected and displayed is the pristine object at its most fashionable moment. And that, court dress and couture, I say for short, and that's what costume collections started out as.
It's just like a painting collection or any other fine art collection. You want the best examples of the time period, and that's what you're looking to collect.
It's all part of this continuum of, well, now do we include how much the story is important? What is the damage? And my particular favourite, what story does the damage itself tell? And especially if there's been a period mend, not a conservation mend, that to me is a very important object in its own right, so that's my mission. Anyway, back to Claire's.
Can you define the difference between period and
Oh yeah, period mend would be if your mother had done a mend at the time,
Okay,
and or, you know, going further back. So something that was done during the life of the garment.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which is
for the,
before.
I
you know,
tried to
the
do
owner.
a
or
version
something.
of your lining.
Oh, there
One
you are.
time.
You've already done
This was
it.
the first
Yes,
thread.
I hadn't even
So I
noticed.
did this while I was still wearing the block, and then it just started to happen.
I love that. I don't know if you can see it properly, but it's got a really subtle.
It's like
Those
some
are great.
piece of ribbon. I
Yeah.
guess.
And the other thing that I always kind of differentiate, I'm looking at it because I work in a museum and the museum point of view. But I also, I have a life outside of the museum. I have my own clothing. And what I would do, if this was mine and I really loved it, I would actually make an underdress in linen. I'm giving you more work to do, I know that. But make an underdress in linen in maybe a pale color,
Yeah.
and then put that over and support it and stitch it all together.
Well, then you can make
So
a
that's-
feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that
Right,
could
top
be,
that.
you know, you could have a little peekaboo there.
Yeah.
But that would be my approach for my personal clothing,
Yeah.
because it's important. It's
No,
a
I
special
like that.
thing.
And the thing is, you can make a replica and wear it because you like the style, but that won't be this. It won't have the feel of it, and it would just not hit the spot. I mean, this is so fragile, so friable, so totally. It's going to go more, and when you wear it, it's going to go more. And when you
Yeah.
wash it, only wash by hand, it's going to be more.
Yeah.
And Anne, when you talk about keeping things away from light, when you talk about the light and the conditions that you need to keep clothes in museums?
So in a museum, I do not do this at home. So basically we do this preventive conservation strategy. And what we're really looking to do is control humidity levels, temperature levels, light levels, because those are the things that damage fabrics and fibers. So we have, of course, a beautiful storage area, special cabinetry. We also make beautiful mounts that we store things on, but it's temperature, humidity control. We do things like we monitor, we do housekeeping. It is so clean, much cleaner than my house. We do pest control, we monitor for pests, you know, because organic fibers are a great attractant to pests. So it's really the white glove treatment, I would say. But the idea is that you provide a good condition, and this is going to eventually fail. We have to accept that. We know that's going to happen. But we just want it to last as long as possible. You know, because we want other people, other generations to see it. You know, and that's really our strategy.
So what should we say to Claire? Claire, how are you feeling about what you might do? Do you think you're going to mend it? Are you going to address it? Yeah.
I love that.
And then you can do the technique of just leaving it to be
Yeah.
fully displayed as a whole, or you can attach it to the endoskeleton to give it some more support. Right, so Claire, what are you going to do about that? You're going to be in step 2. Do you feel, because
the
you're...
fact that I already gave up on it. Yeah.
but you're not now, because you can't now, because now everyone's going to want to know.
Yeah.
I know, and we're encouraging you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not that good with seamstress, so it
Doesn't matter.
Get
Oh,
good at making an endoskeleton.
this is the thing I teach the most, and the first is permission.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, as it is, it's a museum piece without a museum to belong in, and it's not going to be any
Right.
good to you. You can't use it, can't wear it. So you can't really ruin it. You're not going to make it. You can ruin it. This is very, very fragile. So you're going to alter it. You're going to make it a different thing. You're going to make it change its nature. But it's yours, so why not? And there's something about doing. Often people don't really feel they fully own their clothes, especially if they're expensive, if they're designer pieces, and they can't then, it's like a car, you have to take it to someone who's an expert if you don't really understand it, unless you are a good, good with a needle and thread. And we've got to move on from that. We've got to make it
Well, I'm always
ours.
telling everyone else this.
Yeah, well, please continue to. And just think, if you make a spectacular piece out of this, or even whatever you do is going to be
It will be
interesting.
spectacular no matter what you
No
do.
matter what, but it's going to be absolutely even more unique.
Yeah.
And then when you wear it, conversation piece. Thanks so much. Thank you ever so much. That's perfect. Shall we invite Peter up?
Yeah.
Peter, would you please introduce your... Let's get him down. So, well, this is Peter.
Hello, everyone.
And you may, yes, do the...
Fogs up my glasses. If nothing else. You know what? I'll just put this on.
Oh, yes.
This is part of my story. Both of these garments were made by the Filson, they call themselves Filson Company, I guess. And they're based in Seattle, Washington. And they were started in 1897, I believe, and to supply the gold rush in Alaska. And so outdoors, heavy materials, and one of their signature materials is waxed cotton. They call it, their term for it is tin cloth. And it's, they make a variety of cloths. This is also Filson, and I actually have this made by Filson with a custom fabric. This vest is normally made in this material. I wanted to wear it in the summertime. And whether they still do this or not, I don't know. But they made this out of what they call their feather cloth, which is a lighter weight material. So I can wear it in the summertime. So the jacket is approximately 15 years old. I've been a contractor in Manhattan for many years. I wore this 3 seasons.
One thing that you said, which was funny, is that you like it just like it is. I mean, it's funny because we're at a mending event and we're going to talk about mending, but you like it. So talk about that.
Okay.
What's the...
I have had some other Filson coats, and Filson does, again, there's a lot of like customer support things, and you can send your coat back to them. They will repair it. But in some ways, I think right now, it's perfect.
Well, that's definitely a good...
in its way,
Yeah.
it is what it, this is what happens, I guess, if you wear a coat. Tin cloth coat for 15 years.
As an old punk, I can appreciate this look very much. I'm really with you. If you want to keep wearing it, you're going to have to do something. It is not going to be wearable for that much longer. Would that be okay with you, or do you want to have some strategies?
Well, I would like to, I guess, like I said, I'm on the fence about this. I'm fairly confident that I'm not going to send it back to Filson because there's no control.
No, there are companies...
They'll do whatever they do. And
companies that do that, and Patagonia springs to mind. I'm sure you all know that they have the largest repair facility in the United States, which is something. It's in Reno, Nevada, and it's enormous. But you're going to get as you say, you're going to get what you get. But because we're talking about methods and approaches to preserve clothing personally to you. Now that you've thought, have you ever sort of heard of the idea of visible mending before?
Absolutely.
So because
patching
was one very much of an influence forevermore.
No, absolutely. And
what about doing something like that on this? Of course, you're going to lose you need to keep your joint compound because once you sew into a waterproof, you have to seal it. But these are so iconic. There's Filson, there's Barber, there's Dreiserberg, the Australian one, there's Belstaff. Probably someone's got at least one of those. I mean, these are really iconic garments, and they're really not made the same anymore.
No, I think where I'm headed here is stabilization.
Yeah, well, that's
not
maybe
and should do about that. What did you do?
And that would be, particularly this problem.
Well, we would take a different approach in a museum. We might like the wear. We might decide that that's really integral to the garment. But you want to stabilize this. So I would say you probably want to take out the lining and then do underlay support patches right underneath here, and then stitch everything down, and then you'd have to put the lining back in.
That's a pain there.
So I'm giving you a really big
That's a little
jump.
over my head, I have to say.
And also,
I did not say this was going to be easy.
Skills.
this is something, you're going to want to do something with it, right? So I will tell you, I mean, something that can put the person off attacking a large job like this would be, because Anne says you have to take out the lining, and I wouldn't want to do that. Because
Little fight, you just have to start with your little seam ripper.
but if you are,
And while you're watching TV,
all right, so
dedicate an hour in the evening.
you can do that, or you can do my method, which is I've got a huge mending pile, I'm getting through a lot of stuff. I do all my mending by hand, nearly all, and it's stronger by machine, but this you can't get. You need a jigsaw or something, you wouldn't be able to get in there. So if you just want that to work as a pocket, and that's all you want to do to it, because you like the rest of the look, you need to make a patch big enough to get into the
No, but I think I'm less concerned about that. If this hole wasn't here, then this wouldn't bother me at all.
Yeah, it's the front.
Because this wouldn't fool me into thinking it was the pocket. But so if this,
that one, yeah.
that's the problem. Is I reach down and I put my hand on there and I'm looking,
Yeah.
and I go in like this, and
Yeah.
I have put things and they have fallen out.
Sometimes
That's probably why the hole is there.
You could, or you could reconstruct it first. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're going to do a patch that is, and you're not a conservator or
Agreed.
a professional, you can close it like this, just tack it so that it stays in place, and then do a decorative stitch of your choice in a thick, in a good, strong, contrasting colour thread.
Sure.
What's fun about that though is you're doing it in your taste. So when you were a teenager and you did that to your jeans, you did it because you wanted to look as someone who was very, very interested in being trendy at the time.
Well, it was organic and
It's organic, right? But this is organic too. So don't be afraid of attacking it and making it worse and spoiling its personality, because it is your personality. It's better to enhance it.
Sure.
I would really think if you like colour, you might want to play with the palette.
Against that background.
Yeah.
Those would be stunning.
It's wonderful. Can we thank you and
Yeah.
Can we talk?
Yeah. So my name's been said a couple of times. I'm Andrew. I'm the Director of Public Humanities and Research at the Bard Graduate Center. So I sort of feel like I'm cheating by getting to share this. But 3 weeks ago I lost my dad. And I went out to his home and was cleaning up and sort of saying goodbye. And I found this. It wasn't hard to find because he didn't have much. He didn't own much. But this is how I remember him. My relationship to him is frozen in time from when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I continued to see him at different phases. He'd come in and out of my life. But for some reason, this is who I remember him as. His name was Ron, but everyone knew him as Fino, Portuguese for fine, because as much as he was a farmer and sort of tried to portray an outward sense of masculinity, he was a fine young man. And he liked fine things, and he liked how he looked. And so this jacket didn't fit him, hadn't fit him for probably a couple of decades. And he had lived in Australia, Hawaii, in a van for a long time, in a junkie motel for a longer time, and had lost his sight and his teeth, regained his sight and new teeth. And through all of that, he had this jacket. And as I said, when I cleaned out, it probably only took me and my brothers a half a day to deal with all of his affairs. But somehow this stayed. And it smells like him. He hadn't smoked cigarettes in 20-something years, and it reeks like cigarettes. But it reeks like cigarettes in the good way, like my grandma's van. and like him. And so I want to be able to wear it. I don't fit fully in it yet. I look a little uncomfortable in it. But I also want to keep it exactly as it is because besides a Carhartt shirt, this is the clothing that I associate with him.
Yeah, there's something, you would never touch that. I mean, there's one thing about, you can have a designer scarf, I actually bought one, it's a Conde Garçon scarf.
Oh, let me take one end.
And,
It's
you know,
magnificent.
I would absolutely, so this is, by the way, another technique is to mend without mending, you leave the holes. But there's, you know, whatever, there isn't that much damage in this jacket we've found. I mean, there's just a bit of the fur going a little bit, the collar going a little bit threadbare.
And the leather is stiff.
The leather is
Let's
stiff.
say, and there's some places where the lining.
The lining is a little bit, but I mean, it's
It's
such
colourful.
a absolutely, it's got integrity just as it is.
Yeah.
And so there's something about that I think that it doesn't go into the same category as, it's a design piece, you own it. It's a historic garment that you own, do what you want with it. You want, your first instinct, you said, is to keep it.
Yeah. I mean, I as soon as I got home, I put it on, but I put it on in the same way that I put on his aviators, because I don't know, it brought me
You wanted
closer.
it
It made me feel like he was there.
Yeah.
And the smell is so. I encourage you to, as long as you don't mind the smell of strong cigarettes. But I don't really want to wear it. I just want
Right.
to hold it. I want to keep it.
Keep it.
If this were coming into a museum, the inclination, most people would say you want to get it more flexible and put some sort of an oil or a wax-based product on it, but as a museum find, we say no, because that's problematic. That can cause more damage, first of all. Sometimes it's a bit sticky, so it's going to attract dirt, dust, etc. So for things like this, what we do is we vacuum it, get all the surface dirt off as much as we can. Perhaps maybe try a little very subtle humidification. Tiny.
Tiny.
Like the amount you get from a shower, or
No.
No.
But we would put it in like a enclosed container and a bowl of water far away from it, just so that the water would get in the environment, you know, in the sealed environment, and just every week go in and just, you know, and kind of stuff things out with archival tissue and then just modify it a little bit. I actually did this treatment with a pair of shoes. It's bringing it to mind.
But you know, when I learned this stuff from you, I very much took in some of it and used it. I mean, it's knowledge you can adapt for home use, can't you? Because you know exactly how to preserve a thing that you would not.
I mean,
That you just know it, you take it for granted, but people don't always know that stuff, do they? Because people don't know anymore how, and you probably do because you're all enlightened, but you do need to know, people need to know how valuable textile was and should still be. We very much undervalue it extremely, and it is a terribly disruptive cycle that we're in.
you said something earlier. You referred to one of the pieces of clothing by the person's name, which I really loved. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Catherine.
Now would be a great time to invite Sunkai up to join us, if that's all right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the reason why I was asking about the name
Yeah.
is because something that I've heard several times is this sort of undercurrent of precarity, that these things are going to change, and there's not a lot we can do about it. But then that coupled with the naming, I think of this as female, and I love the idea that this is Catherine, and so I can't help but then go to this thought of active matter. The Conserving Active Matter, as your exhibition is called, is more about this sort of dance, this ongoing relationship we have with the material world, and that is filled with care and precarity. And so, Sunkai, we're so grateful to have you to join us, and please come. And so where we're going to go from here is just quickly, not so quickly, take your time. But if you want to tie this a bit into your exhibition, and also Kate and Ann, if you have any thoughts, This will be our primer so that then we can all go downstairs together and look at the exhibition with this more personal connection to the notion of conservation. So, Sun-Kai.
Sure. So, hi, my name is Sun-Kai. I'm trained as an objects conservator, so I should say that textiles and dress is not really my domain, so I really love the conversation that we were having earlier. I am one of 6 curators, sounds crazy, I know, of the exhibition downstairs, Conserving Active Matter, which is sort of the culminating project of a 10-year-long research initiative for which I was very lucky to have been here for the last 3. And the exhibition really presents conservation as a way of asking questions, as much as we associate conservation with mending with the activities of mending, but it's also, I think, a way of asking questions, much as I think this program has shown, is that it's really about the stories that come up when we ask these questions of, what is it that we want, we're preserving, what is it that we want to display, we want to keep, we want to replace. And I think to situate what I think has more commonly been associated with conservation as this practice that's very siloed in museum practice, with sort of the broader, I think what Andrew said, the broader culture of care. So I guess, one of the things we want to talk about was also visibility and invisibility of mending, and I think labor, which we kind of sort of mentioned and then kind of left at that. I'm curious because I think one of the hardest things to do in some ways with an exhibition is introducing the human presence. It's introducing the conservators who would have conserved items in the exhibition, and I responding to what Andrew was just saying, I was at a retirement party for a conservator maybe 6 years ago, and something he said really stuck with me is that one of the privileges he had as a conservator working at the Metropolitan Museum was that every day when he went home, he would say goodbye to his friends. The items that he would have this relationship with, and I think in that way, today's conversation is about reintroducing people who do this work and how we do this work.
May I answer, because you said labour, and of course we haven't really talked about that. This is so important and it's so germane to mending, and for centuries when textile was so valuable, people had to mend it, but it was more of a source of shame if it was visible. So now I must very much emphasize that the visible mending that we can do now, that is such a luxury, that we have that time and we are able to show it, and also it's flipped, that the look is now fashionable, whereas it was for centuries shameful. And that's all I want to say at this moment, but the labour aspect is really vital.
With Claire's dress earlier, I think Andy said, that what you would do in a museum would be to line it and to kind of restore its appearance in a more sort of specific way.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think there's a certain tension with visibility of the men and visibility of the labor that is performed.
Yeah.
There's, I think one of the questions might be, if the men becomes invisible, do we forget the labor that goes into maintaining and caring for these items?
Yeah, sometimes what we try to do is I had a professor many years ago, and her byline was, you owe the public the truth. And you want to be as honest as you can with your stabilization, with your repair. I actually do have an example. We had gotten an 18th century woman's gown, and it was this amazing, incredible textile that was patterned. It was pinks and greens and cream color. It was just absolutely stunning. But the problem was it was a ruffle sleeve, it was a short with a ruffle, and it was missing one of the ruffles. Now this, and we wanted to put it on display. It's not going to read correctly to the viewer. The viewer is going to be confused. Does it have one ruffle? Is it asymmetrical? No, none of that. So one technique that we do use is we took a photograph of the fabric, and we had it digitally printed on a piece of silk that was about the approximate weight the garment. But we say that in the label copy. Or we also don't do it so perfect that it's fooling your eye. So it's kind of, we have to do things to make it whole and make it readable to the viewer. But we don't want to fool them. We don't want to say, this came like this, because it didn't.
And I'm curious, actually, thinking about both the mends that you did on the scarf in a very deliberate, visible way, and the way that you've described with having to add, parts, for example,
the
to
ruffle
dress.
on the sleeve.
How you think of intervening in that way, because in a sense, they both are very sort of direct interventions that are not quite reversible.
I brought one other kind of talking about, I mean, this isn't, I wasn't trying to set this up because it isn't, but it does happen to be a bit more reversible when you're done, because you're appending, and this is such a classic type of mending. It's probably be, I don't know if it's oldest, but it's a weave. You're appending a weave onto a weave or onto a knit, and it's actually is quite reversible.
But back to the sleeve ruffle, we do now, when we took it off display, we remove the ruffle and we store it separately from the rest of the garment. Because it's printed, we're not quite sure what the inks will do, so we don't want them to interfere with the original material, but it's stored next to it in a polyethylene bag, so that when it goes back on display, it can be used again. But it's just that piece was critical to the understanding of the object. So, that's how we kind of play around with it, and that's what we do with reversibility, because we always want it to be reversible.
Is that what micro interventions is? It called micro?
Minimal intervention.
Minimal intervention,
Yeah.
little tiny bits, incremental, well, what you were describing.
Yeah, but I think the sort of really interesting thing about this is that is this sort of recognition that, it is about, at the end of it all, it is about retrievability. Just as all of these sort of case studies or stories that we've heard today, there is about this sort of lineage, this history of how people have used it, how your dad has used this coat, how you will use it, how you will care for it.
One thing I will say as conservators, what we try to do is, which is critical, documentation. Write it down.
Oh, God, yes.
I'm writing a note to the next person who has to take care of it, so they know what I did.
Yeah.
Whether it's photography or a written dialogue.
And by the way, if you're passing something on that is clothing to, say, a Goodwill, you might consider documenting it by
A note in the pocket.
That's charming.
And when you said documentation, writing sort of a note about the piece, and one of the questions that came to us as a committee is, how do we organize the exhibition? How do we find items that speak to their conservation rather than what they necessarily are? And can you actually separate them, right?
Yeah.
Is not what things are the result of how they have been cared for and conserved in that sense.
Interesting.
We're about to head downstairs. I just think that's a perfect way to go and discover some of those stories and discover that tension between what is the object and what is the conservation. So we're going to go down together, the first and second floor. This is one of those special moments where you get to be in the exhibition with no one else. Hopefully we can take some of these thoughts and ideas into how we discover the exhibition. First, thank you so much, Anne.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Sukai, thank you. And Kate, thank you so much.
Tell me the same language.